Today's gospel lesson begins with an interaction between Jesus and a lawyer. And the lawyer is up to nothing less than entrapment. He knows perfectly well that Jesus' teachings and practices have put him at odds with the religious authorities of the day. So he asks the question that everyone present knows the right answer to, the scriptural answer to. It is a question designed not to get information, but to make the asker look pious and righteous, and to give Jesus an opportunity to trip up with an unorthodox answer. What must I do to be certain that I'll go to heaven? The lawyer asks. But Jesus does not rise to the bait, nor does he strike back. Rather, he invites the lawyer to share the scriptural answer that everyone present knows, and the lawyer abideth. He says, the familiar commandment, love God and your neighbor as yourself. Ask a simple question and get a simple answer, right? So standing there with egg on his face, the lawyer tries again. Surely he can engage Jesus in some kind of a face-saving debate if he asks him a truly dicey question. So he does. Who is my neighbor? He says. Funny you should ask, says Jesus. Well, no, I made that up. I wish he had said it, but he didn't. He does have, however, Jesus has a story ready for this moment. A story, it's probably one of the most familiar stories in the Bible. It's a story we have heard so many times that maybe we can't even hear it anymore. So I'm going to try to shake it up a bit for us this morning. With whom do you identify? I'm guessing you are already putting yourself in the position of the Samaritan. And maybe you're wondering if you would measure up in the sense of being the one to help the victim as the Samaritan did. And that's fine. That's part of the point of the story. We all need to think about that question. Who are we willing to help and who not? Who might be lying in that ditch that we would not necessarily see as our neighbor? What questions might we ask to try to determine whether someone in any kind of need is worthy of our help? Are we tempted to assume that a person has brought misfortune on themselves? That the man in the ditch got robbed because he was careless, shouldn't have traveled that road alone? If that sounds far-fetched, please remember that women are often thought to have brought sexual harassment and sexual assault on themselves by their attire and their behavior. How often do we have a sneaking suspicion that a person is poor because they are lazy or made bad financial decisions, as if any of us hasn't? Are we more concerned about accidentally helping someone who's just working the system or about failing to help someone who really needs it? As a practical matter, we must use our limited resources wisely, but at the same time, it's important to recognize that Jesus never once played the worthiness game. But now let's turn the story on its head, or more precisely, let's reverse our perspective. Let's jump down into that ditch and put ourselves in the position of the victim. As you lie there struggling to regain consciousness, to come out of the fog of having been beaten, as you hurt from head to toe, look up. Who is your rescuer? Who is scraping you off the pavement, tending your wounds, and paying your hospital bill? See, here's where we need to get rid of the good Samaritan. First, notice that Luke does not say he was a good Samaritan. Luke just says he was a Samaritan. We added the good, and I suspect it has the same meaning as when someone tells a demeaning joke and then follows it quickly with, I'm really not a bigot, I'm really not a racist, whatever. One of my best friends is black or Asian or gay or whatever the group of people who got slurred by the joke. In other words, we're quite willing to recognize good examples, exceptions to the rule of categories of people we tend to look down on. So get rid of the good. He was a Samaritan. He might have been a jerk 90% of the time, for all we know. But let's also get rid of the Samaritan while we're at it, because Samaritans don't mean much to us today. The relationship between Samaritans and Jews in the time of Jesus is all academic to us today. We know they were enemies, but that's remote history. We can't really feel that. So, put in the Samaritan's place a person of the kind you fear the most, like the least, resent the most, whatever. Now here's where I had to put some real thought into this, okay? I fancy myself to be a pretty open-minded person, so all the usual marginalized groups of our society don't give me pause. An immigrant, maybe one who doesn't have right documents, come on down, help me. Someone who doesn't conform to sex or gender norms, or a Muslim perhaps, sure, pick me up and carry me home. I'm good. But then I started thinking about people at the opposite end of the political spectrum from me. People whose opinions I detest. Do I really want them saving my life? Now, my side of the political spectrum, we would do it in a heartbeat, but them, surely they wouldn't. And then this morning in the shower, it really hit me. Right, this morning, I had to rewrite my sermon. This morning in the shower, it hit me. I thought of a person, and I felt that gut punch that tells you, yeah, that's it. That's the one. I thought of a Proud Boy. You know who I'm talking about. The Proud Boys, who were in the front lines of the assault on the Capitol on January 6th, a year and a half ago. They are Bette Kauffman's Samaritan. Who's yours? I suspect we all have one. And put that person in this story. Put in the story the last person in the world you would think capable of the act of mercy at the center of the story. Put in the story the person who makes you recoil in horror at the very thought of accepting help from. Put in the story an enemy, whoever the enemy is to you. And now ask yourself, am I willing to have that person rescue me? Am I willing to receive that person's compassion and mercy? And yes, that person's love of neighbor, me, as self. You see, just as we are concerned about the worthiness of those we help, we are also concerned about the worthiness of those we are willing to be helped by. Maybe even more so. We look up from whatever ditch we have landed in, hoping, expecting to see Jesus, right? But what if Jesus turns out to be our bosom enemy? Or more accurately, what if our bosom enemy turns out to be Jesus? See, Jesus has crafted a story here that shocks the status quo and shatters the boundaries of relationship. We are pretty comfortable, open-minded, and inclusive as long as we are the ones handing out grace, as long as we get to be the charitable rescuer. Not so much when we are the ones lying in the ditch. When we are the ones lying in the ditch, we want our rescuer to be none other than Jesus himself, someone we truly look up to. But the relentless reversals of the good news do not afford us that comfort. The gospel tells us over and over again in every possible way that we are all God's children. Not one of us is any better than anyone else. Not one of us is loved by God any more or any less than anyone else. The good news destroys the worthiness system that is so second nature to us. So following Jesus means this: we will never need to ask, who is my neighbor? In the name of God, Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, amen. Amen.